Hey everyone, welcome to the Oasis podcast. I'm your host, Miss AJ. Thanks for tuning in. An oasis is something that provides refuge, relief, or a pleasant contrast, and that is exactly what you will find tuning into the Oasis podcast. This is a space where I and special guests will be cultivating intentional and honest conversations about life's journey. Subscribe everywhere you listen to podcasts and watch us on YouTube now. Wouldn't you love to create your own personal oasis? What is an oasis, you ask? An oasis is something that provides refuge, relief, or a pleasant contrast, and that is exactly what you will find at AJO Consulting Services, LLC. AJO Consulting Services is a company that provides individuals, communities, and businesses of color with coaching and consulting services, personal and professional development, as well as social and community connection services. These services include, but are not limited to, dating, life, relationship, and business coaching, finance management, travel experience curation, wellness navigation, and much more. Are you ready to find, connect, and release? Come experience your oasis today. Visit our website to learn more at www.ajoconsultingservices.com. Follow us on Facebook at AJO Consulting and Instagram at AJO Consult. Also, email us at info@ajoconsultingservices.com. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Oasis podcast. Thank you for joining me again. As you can see, no background, no fanciness, just me, you talking today. I wanted to just hop on while I had the energy. I'm a little bit under the weather, but to really get all this information in about my fertility update, because it's been a while since I updated you all. I've been really just documenting things so that I can give you all the information as I remember it. But I will be looking down on my phone because my brain. So I want to just kind of go over maybe some of the past things we talked about or that I brought up about my experience, and then add on the new things that I've been experiencing. So when did I start my fertility journey? I started it in 2020. It was 2020. It was early 2020. No, like mid 2020, because it was during COVID. And it was something that I had on my mind for a while. Not necessarily going to have a baby like right away, but I wanted to know what was going on with me. And it really was something that nowadays I think a lot more women, but a lot more Black women are talking about their experiences. But at that time, COVID is happening. You're thinking about life. You're thinking about all the things, the what ifs and the things that you just kind of left floating around and you never really got answers for. And that's where I was. I was like, you know what? I didn't have a partner at the time. I was just coming off a breakup. And I just wanted to know for myself, like, what was going on. It's not something that your GYNs really discuss with you, honestly. No one else, honestly, outside of, oh, you're getting out there. When you gonna have a baby? No one really talks about fertility, what it looks like. How do you check it? How do you know you're okay? So I wanted to go ahead and just find out, just for the sake of me. And if and when I decided to have children, I would know what the deal was. Like, I would know if I could, if I couldn't, as opposed to just having this big old question mark. And I know that a lot of women wait till, especially now, are waiting till later in life to have children. And I didn't want to get to that point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have kids. And then I'm like, oh, well, you can. And if you just would have did it a year or two ago, you would have been fine. So I just wanted to just find out. So I went ahead and found a fertility specialist through my general practitioner. I'm going to try to be as detailed as possible. Some of you might have already heard this information. You're going to hear it again. But this is for people who haven't heard the information. And also because I think it's important for us to detail our experiences so we can demystify for other people, so that other people, when they're going through it, they want to know what to do, but also not be scared of the process. So I'm going to try to be as detailed as possible so that you guys can get all the information that's necessary. So I went to my general practitioner, was like, hey, I am questioning or just like have questions about my fertility. I, talked about my experience and from what I recollected about like my mom, you know what I mean? Because that's also important. Family history is important. And because I don't know much about like my father's side of the family, I only can remember what I felt like, what I knew and saw, remembered about what my mom went through. It wasn't a conversation I had with her, to be honest, just things that I remembered. And I'm like, I remember being in GI school and sis was going through the changes, you know what I mean? And doing the math, she was kind of like in her 40s. So I was like, that might mean, right, that I might go through the changes early too, right? She went through her, like, because my mom had me at 33. And so by junior high, which are like 11, she was like her mid 40s. And I remember her going through them changes. Like, sis had the windows up, like it was a dead brick, and then she was hot, you know? So it was like things like that. Of course, at the time, didn't understand what the hell was going on. But now you're like, she might have, been going through the changes. And I know later on in the years, just conversations here and there, I'm like, yeah, she did go through menopause rather, early. Like, I don't even know if the 40s is early. It seems early to me. I don't know. I feel like you're still pretty young in your 40s. So, and anyway, so I, talked about that. I'm like, I'm just curious. At this point, I am how old? In 2020, I am 30. I'm 33, turning 34. So I'm like, yeah, let's see what's going on. So she's like, cool, no problem. And so she ran her own blood test, and her blood test is very like basic. I think it looks at estrogen levels, progesterone levels, maybe some like other things, but I didn't feel like it was like really that detailed. But one thing about my doctor, which I love, well, she's no longer my doctor because she retired. Happy for her, but also sad. But she's always like quick to be like, girl, I'll give you all the resources you want. And she was a Black woman, so we were here. And she's like, I'll give you the resources you want, whatever you're interested in, we can do this, no worries. So she was like, okay, let me give you a referral, when you're interested or when you're ready to you can go see a fertility specialist. So I'm like, all right, cool. You know what I mean? Sounds good. I didn't jump on it right away. Like, I felt like I waited maybe a few weeks or a month or so before I actually called. I guess I had to muster up the energy. I don't know what it was, but I kind of was like, oh, okay. I kind of made the first step, got the blood test done. And I'm like, okay, maybe that was sufficient. I don't know, honestly, at this point. I can't really remember exactly why I didn't jump on it right away, but it wasn't that long after either. So I ended up calling them. It was COVID. So a first visit was virtual. They talked you through it was a consult, like talking you through the process of like what it would look like. But I told them, as of right now, ain't no man. So just me wanting to know what I can do, where I stood. And they're like, cool, no problem. And so, then I set up an actual in person to do some blood work and to do some, I always get these mixed up, ultrasounds or sonograms, but it was transvaginal. So that's ultrasound to check very specific times during your cycle. So right after your menstrual or like 3 days in or something like that, you call them and then they give you an appointment and you come in and then they go in there in your vagina to check your eggs, right? To check how your eggs are forming. And then there's another step. So there's different steps that they give you. Again, I don't know if different places do it differently, but that's how my place did it. So they checked your egg reserves, they checked your hormone levels at different parts of your cycle, and all those things came out good. They're like, you're good. Outside of the fact that I had fibroids, right? Which I knew I had. I didn't know, like, really, I knew how big they were, I think. I didn't know how big they were. I didn't really know kind of where they were located and how that would impact my fertility, because I was having issues with my fibroids. I don't know if I mentioned, but like these, well, not these, these past few years, I want to say past 4 to 5 years, I want to say, they started to like change my cycle. My cycles got a little longer. They got way more heavy. And I think more painful too. Like the cramping and stuff got like really more painful. So after doing testing like for that, like I realized, I knew I had, okay, fibroids are there, they're impacting my cycle. Okay. And so this is when the conversation came, if y'all might have remembered, because I feel like that was in the last update. I was debating whether or not I should get the surgery done, because that was also brought up again with my fertility specialist. And she was just like, hey, you're not, ready to have kids right now. It might be a good time if you want to get it done, get the fibroids removed. They may impact your fertility. Get them removed. At least that'd be something that's out the way when you are ready to go ahead and, have a baby. I thought about it. Not a friend of surgery. And I just started researching and trying to find out what are some other things I could do. And I really also was on the fence about it, because surgery would help mitigate the symptoms I was having, but it didn't guarantee that they wouldn't come back. And I just hate the thought of like having had the surgery, think you're good, and then when I was ready to have children, finding out maybe there were more fibers, and then I don't know. It didn't sit well with me. So I was just like, you know what? I don't want to go ahead and just have a surgery. I'm like, what else could I do to find out really how it's impacting me and not just guess it might impact me? So with the fertility specialist, went ahead and did some other testing. We did a saline sonogram, and that's when they put saline solution in your uterus to see like if you were to get pregnant. It kind of makes your uterus open up into a certain size, not like to the max, but to a certain size to see, okay, if you got pregnant and your uterus got to a certain size with a growing child, how would it look? Like, how is the fibroid impacting that process? And we did that, and it was like, it looks like you'll be okay, honestly. So what it would be though, if you did get pregnant, is that it might be uncomfortable. You might have some pain, but it doesn't seem like it would impact the fetus that much. That sounds like good news to me, right? But of course, during that time span, of course, it's like my cycles were like, ugh, you know what I mean? Like they were annoying me, and I was like really seriously contemplating getting a surgery. But then I was like, oh, let me just try to find some other ways to see other things I can do. I'm big on like herbs and teas and stuff. So I looked up some things I can take. So I started drinking raspberry leaf tea, drinking it, and also taking the pills. And that really helped my cycles a lot. Like it helped a lot. Like the pills helped immediately with the pain, and the tea helped immediately with the pain. It took a little while though for the cycle to like lessen, and lighten up. But it helped. It helped. Like it did. So now I gave you like kind of the summary of where I left off. And now it's to give you the actual update stuff, right? So, all right, found out this stuff, was like, okay, good. I feel empowered. I know where I stand. I know I'm good. Over these years, like, there was always a question mark, but come to find out, it was just God protected, sis. Okay. And so it wasn't because my body couldn't, quote unquote, do what it was supposed to do. Cool. I feel good about it. Wonderful. Time goes by, and, I meet somebody, and we are a thing. We become a thing. We become an item. And this is kind of like one of the first things that I bring up. Like, hey, I am on this fertility journey, and I forget exactly what part of it I was on, but I like let them know, like, this is where I'm at. This ain't saying I'm fit to have a kid with you. But what I'm saying is, if you're like interested in me on a serious note, you want to move forward with me, this is something that I want. And this is kind of where I'm at in the process. And and this was important for me to bring up and also make clear, like, I ain't saying I'm having a kid with you, bro, but this is where I'm at. So if you hear me talking about stuff, if you hear me going to doctor's visits, don't think it's trying to get you or some shit. Like, this is something I've been doing. I just want you to know what's going on. And I want to be able to talk to you about stuff if, whatever comes up, right? Because if you're going to be my partner, I might as well be able to talk to you and about, that stuff. And so I, let them know, this is where I'm at.
This is what's been going on. This is why I'm doing it. And also just bring up the conversation of, hey, do you want kids? Cool. And here's where I'm at. Are you open to the possibility that kids don't come in the picture traditionally? Just because my numbers was good, one, doesn't mean that I wouldn't have difficulty getting pregnant. Because at the same time, it's been mad years. Can't say I was the safest. I mean, I was in long-term conversations. I was in long-term relationships, and outside of like early college, and I was super young then anyway, where my doctor actually confirmed that it probably not confirmed, but from what I explained to her, she was like, you probably had a chemical pregnancy. But since then, I've never had anything of the sort. So since that, I mean, sis has been protected. And so nothing's happened. So I'm like, look, I don't know, right? Like, I'm good. I guess numbers wise, quote unquote, hormonally, scientifically, I'm good. But that doesn't mean that the process will be easy. So you cool with that? He was. He's like, sure. I'm like, okay, but understand it's not about, oh, we just gonna have more sex and like trying to get it in. It's like, okay, if we get to a point and we want to have children, we might have to do IUI, might have to do IVF. It's not like a quick, easy process. It's going to take time, yada, yada. So like, I really got into that, and it was kind of not crazy. I don't think it's crazy, but I'm pretty sure it's not something like kind of conversations he was used to having. But I did that shit very early on, to be honest with you. Like within that first month, we were talking to each other. I was like, look, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. What up, though? Like, and at that time, it was kind of like we were just getting to know each other. So I ain't really had nothing to lose because I didn't know if I even liked you. I didn't know if we were going to be anything for real, but I wanted to be an open book so you can know what's going on. And it turned out that it was received well. Cool. So talking about that piece of it, but also talking about the piece of, because a lot of men don't think about that part, like I might be high, but you might not be. So are you also open to you might having to do testing and finding out certain things? So that's the conversation to have as well, ladies. So those of you who are guessing, thinking about going through the process, definitely have that piece of the conversation. And again, there's nothing, I hate to even say it in that way, like, oh, something is wrong with you. Everyone functions differently. Our body function differently. If you're in your 30s and your late 30s, we've been around quite some time, yeah, almost 4 decades. The body's not going to function the same way. So even for men, women and men who might have had children already, like they could have had kids in their 20s, that doesn't make you fertile forever. It means you were very fertile at that point. You do it 15, 20 years later, your body's not going to function the same. And that whole little adage, that whole little saying, oh, men can have kids at any time, that's not 100% true. The quality of sperm, though they have a lot of it, the quality of it may not be as good. So that's also something to keep in mind, and not kind of, I want us not to carry around this like thought of like, oh, if something's wrong, it's definitely the lady. Or something is necessarily, quote unquote, wrong with you. It's just your body is just functioning different. And there's a lot of ways to kind of go around that. It's not like, oh, this is the end of the story and you're screwed. So I just want to throw that out there. Don't be afraid, guys, to get the testing done. You should want to know than not to know. And a lot of times, a lot of things that impact our bodies is really like how we eating, the fact that we're not taking care of ourselves, and just taking some vitamins sometimes would change shit up and will change that whole thing up. So it's better to know than to not know. At least you can do something about it. But anyway, off my soapbox. So we have these conversations and it's like, all right, we're on the same page. Cool. We ain't fit to do this like right away, but at least you notice what it is. I continue to go about my business. We get to know each other, yada, yada, yada. We become official. All right, cool. Like, okay, you cool. Family cool. I'm like, all right, I can see this going down. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, cool. So it's about, at this point now, it's like a year later from when, no, it's a little more than a year later from when I started my fertility journey. Yeah. And then we're like, hey, okay, what you trying to do? What you trying to do? Okay, let's see what happens. Now, it started out more like you know, we grown. We was not trying to not have a baby. And things wasn't really happening. But then we like have an adult conversation like, hey, we've been doing these things. So you still good if something happens? Yes. Cool. Then it's kind of moved on to like, all right, we've been doing what we've been doing. Ain't nothing been happening. Are you ready and willing to like go and see what's going on, what can get done? And it's like, yeah, let's do this. Bang. All right. So now we go back now. So the process for me is pretty much the same as when I started it on my own. Like, all right, you go run the blood work again, do that ultrasound again, make sure you're still in a good same spot, your good spot. Numbers are still good. Egg results look good. Quality of eggs look good. But we're good. Checking in on him, making sure. So by checking in on him, it's like you get a semen analysis. They also do blood work for the men. So just so you're aware, they check for STDs, STIs. They also check for like, like normal blood work things, right? Like just they want to generally see the person's health as well. So this is why I said in your 20s is one thing, and then now when you're like 15, 20 years later, it could be something else. So they check for just any like other little things because these other little things can impact the quality of sperm, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. So things are fine. Things like, all right, boom. So at this point, it's considered unexplained fertility. So now when you get to a certain age, right, and you've been trying, they say, I think you have to be, no. All right. So when you are, I think it's 35 or younger. Yes, I want to say 35 or younger. Make sure I'm not lying to y'all. Was I 35 by this point? It's 33 turned 34. Yes. 34 by that. Okay, yes, that's correct. So when you are 35 or younger and you have been trying for a year, that's when your insurance would technically cover you doing fertility treatments, right? Then you're considered infertile. And that could be for whatever reason, but it's considered unexplained infertility. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. Yeah, something like that. And then when you are 35 and older, though, it's 6 months of trying, nothing's happening, then it's called unexplained infertility, right? Because technically they ran the numbers and they ran the tests and things look fine. So technically, scientifically, you should be able to do it. But there may be other reasons, right? And those other reasons really could be, again, biological. What that means is maybe you're like, for women, like our pH is like too high for this particular partner's sperm to get to where they're going. It could be our cervical mucus is too thick, or just something else like that. So it's not necessarily like this big old like, oh my God, like thing going on. It just literally could be your body just like, no. And then that's it. So like, don't feel a kind of way. And it also could be just like, with the guy's sperm. All right, maybe homies is moving too slow. Maybe they ain't really shaped the way they're supposed to be shaped. Maybe there's not as much that it's supposed to be. And it doesn't mean that something is like crazy wrong. It just means, all right, this batch, because literally men create new batches. This is something I learned, like new batches of semen every like 3 months or something like that. And yes, men, I don't know how to explain it. Y'all gonna have to look this up. But it's like, this is generally new batches every 3 months. So yes, you could be ejaculating every day, but within that 3-month span, it's still considered a batch. Look it up, y'all. I don't know. And so that batch could just be, oh, these don't look that great. So we got to, kind of reset, right? And so you can start taking vitamins, you can start drinking more water, start exercising. And so the next batch could actually be like really good. Every soldier looking good. So not to also feel bad about like, oh man, this thing said blah, 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 blah. It only is like serious issues if those numbers are like the quantity of sperm is like really low, like it falls below a certain number, then okay, like then it's like we might have to try some other things. If maybe like it's the quantity And if you don't have any at all, right? Like part of quantity, but like if the numbers look really, really low, then that could be an issue. Sometimes the shape, when it's a percentage of them have this off shape, that might be also a biological thing or genetic thing. And I feel like there's another kind of like main issue that tends to happen. Or you'll be shooting blanks completely. And so you have the semen, you have the ejaculation, and just really nothing in there. Or like the tails like are like disfigured or whatever, and like they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So, you know, different reasons. But again, some things can be fixed and some things, and I feel like a lot of things could be fixed. And then some things might just take a little extra TLC, right? All right, let's fast forward back to where we were. So now everything's good. We technically have unexplained infertility. So the next step with that is, so now they give you options. You have options now to take certain medications to get a boost, right? To help you maybe increase ovulation. No, let me rephrase that. To time your ovulation, you have options to increase how many eggs are ovulated to increase the chances of pregnancy. Those two things can be coupled with timed intercourse. And I know that sounds wild, but essentially what that means is when you are quote unquote going at it naturally without intervention, it's kind of like a shot in the dark, essentially. Y'all just like, hey, you're looking good. What up? And y'all getting it on. You don't even know if anything's going to happen. Some women are in tune with their body and they know when they're ovulating and blah, blah, blah. But even still, it's like, I think I'm ovulating and it feels like ovulation. It may not necessarily be, might be a few days too short, a few days too early. You don't know, right? And so timed intercourse is bang. They've been now, understand, they've been doing these ultrasounds and they've been mapping out, okay, on this day, this is where your body is at, blah, 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 blah. We're checking your numbers. And it's a lot. I don't like needles. It's a lot of blood tests, okay? I'll be like, goddamn. So they draw a lot of blood because they need to measure what's going on, right? But this is why it's important, because now they can tell you, doing this day, you take this drug, you should be ovulating by this time, you need to have sex. Bang, 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 bang. And so that's what it's called, timed intercourse. So that's an option. The second option is you're still taking all these drugs to boost the body, and you can do IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. And the third choice is IVF, in vitro fertilization. 3 different options. They also might look a little differently depending on where you go, but I'll break down all 3 of them for you all, just so you know. I learned about all of them. My doctor's office has told us about all of them. We didn't do all of them, but I think it's still important to know. I was open to doing all of them. My partner was as well. And so, you know, so so let's talk about times intercourse. So depending on the women's, the woman's numbers, I can only talk about my side of it because I didn't look too deeply into the male side because my partner didn't need those interventions, but the interventions may be a little different for a man, right? So depending on what his issues might be, he might take certain drugs and might have to do certain things. But from my end, I didn't have any issues with my numbers. My egg reserves were okay. My hormones were at great levels. I didn't really have to take certain medications where if some women, if they have, you know, maybe low progesterone, maybe low estrogen, they didn't ovulate regularly, they would do different things to accommodate those different issues. For me, I didn't have those issues. So what my doctor was doing was trying to like make sure we just knew when I was going to actually ovulate. So I was ovulating regularly. So what we did is we used drugs to make sure we knew when exactly I was going to ovulate. And also so that we could increase the amount of eggs that were ovulating. So that's why we use Ovidrel. Oh, we use letrozole and Ovidrel. Letrozole, it may be known by some other names. I don't know what the other names are. These are the names that I know. Letrozole were pills, and she gave me like the lowest dose, and that was to increase the amount of eggs that were being produced. I'm trying to remember. So when y'all see me looking away, that's just what it is.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Oasis podcast. I hope you were able to find something that resonated with you on your journey. Don't forget to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts and YouTube. Rate us and leave us a review and comment on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and YouTube. Share your favorite episode and like us on Instagram and Facebook. If you have any questions, comments, want to be a guest, or any show ideas, contact us at ajaysoasis@gmail.com. That's AAYJAYSOASIS@gmail.com, or direct message us on Instagram and Facebook.